Hi, I'm Suddull. I'm a PhD candidate here at Macquarie University. I'm the recipient of the Alaine Davidson PhD Scholarship that's funded by the Australian Rotary Health. Today I'll be taking you through a brief tour of the lab and a behind the scenes take on what I do. So why don't you come with me and we'll check it all out. Here we have our joke board as you walk into the lab. People put up some funny banter up there for us so that our days are filled with laughter. I'm just going to put on my gloves and my glasses and then we'll get into the lab. So come with me, and it's this way to the Biobank. So in here is the Biobank for our motor neuron disease patients. They donate samples from blood, plasma, tissue, we even have hair and skin samples as well. Once a patient has donated their samples to us, this is where it goes for processing. Behind us we have a DNA extraction machine that's currently going on some blood samples. For me, I'd retrieve my plasma samples from the freezers that are located behind you. So why don't you come with me and we'll go and get some of those. So these are my plasma samples. Let's get started and see how we can process them. So here's my patient samples. I'm going to put them on ice while I work. So patient plasma is my primary focus, and I'm looking at protein biomarkers that can be found in patient plasma. We want to find whether there's levels of different proteins that are increased or decreased in our patient samples compared to controls. It's these differences between patients and controls in their protein levels that will be able to tell us whether or not a person has motor neuron disease, what stage of motor neuron disease, what their prognosis is, and also what type of MND that they might have. So I'm just going to start adding some different reagents to my plasma so that I can extract the proteins of interest. So now the machine's running, you'll be able to see our buffer solution. It's got some nice little bubbles starting down the bottom and coming all the way up, so that's how we know that it's working, and our proteins will be going down into the gel. So one that I prepared earlier, this is a gel once it's been stained in a special stain so that we can see the protein bands, and you can see the difference in between patients, all the differences of their proteins. We will then do some further processing. This takes a few days, but eventually we'll end up with our sample in a mass spec vial. Now this isn't protein, this is peptide. So a peptide is a protein that has been chopped up into tiny little pieces, and that's what we need to fire into the mass spec machine so that it can identify the peptides and we can get a good quantification of proteins. All right, so here we are in the Analytical Lab. This is where we have our mass spec machine. This one's called Francis. Here we have our computer. This is where we do all of the programming for Francis. So what I'll do is I'll put my samples in and press start on the machine. Once I do this, the mass spectrometer will start its analysis, and then we'll be able to get some big data files and analyse what proteins are in our samples. So come with me over to the offices and we'll be able to do some data analysis.
So this is our office space, and this is usually where I come to do a lot of my computer work. This is my desk here, but for today I'm going to take you to one of the boardrooms and we're going to go through some of the data that I was doing earlier. Right, so after we do our mass spec, we then end up with all of these numbers. And this can be quite confusing and a bit daunting for you to look at. So what I like to do is turn it into a nice visual after some data analysis, and we can delve down deeper into what it actually means for our MND patients. So this is a heat map that I've been able to generate from that data that was just up on the screen, and we can see a difference between MND patients and controls when they're compared, and we can delve down even further and we can see a difference between what type of motor neuron disease a patient may have. This is incredibly helpful, not only for first diagnosis of the patient, but being able to tell what type of motor neuron disease they have, and then we can also tell what type of prognosis that they would have from these results. And we'll be able to translate that again into a real-world application to diagnose a person with motor neuron disease. Thank you very much for coming with me today on a brief behind the scenes tour of my lab. I'd just like to thank the Australian Rotary Health and the Alaine Davidson PhD Scholarship for funding my work. Without it, we wouldn't be able to have this research being conducted, and it's really vital for motor neuron disease patients for their diagnosis and prognosis. So thank you again, and I look forward to hearing from you.